Hi everyone, my name's Jo and welcome to a fun quick make today. I'm not the biggest fan of Halloween, but it is coming up and I have put together a little tutorial to make these little pumpkin earrings. So here they are in a size 8 seed bead, which is what I'm going to use to show you how to do it. But I've also made them in 11 seed beads, so if I hold them up together, you can see a difference in the size there. So they would be best made using Delicas beads because of the shape of Delicas, that perfect cylinder with the chopped off top and bottom. They stack beautifully like bricks, and this tutorial is using brick stitch, so we're going to investigate increasing our brick stitch and then decreasing it coming up to the top. We'll start by having a quick look at our materials that we're going to use. So as I've mentioned, I'm going to be making it in the size 8 seed beads, but you could do it in the 11s as well. And I've got an orange, a black and a green. I've got some shepherd hooks or some ear wires. I'm using Wildfire today. I quite often use Fireline, but Wildfire comes in this beautiful green color, and therefore the thread is not as visible in the brick stitch as it would be if I was using a white or a black. I've got my thread zapper and I have got a size 10 beading needle. I've also created a little brick stitch chart for our pumpkin, and what I will do is I'm going to just hold it very still so that you can screenshot it and you can use it to work from. I'll also pop it on my Facebook page with the link to this video tutorial. So there's your pumpkin. If you want to take a screenshot, now is your time. If you're going to be beading from my little pattern here, I just want to explain to you how we're going to read it, because it's a little different to reading a book. So with this, we're actually going to start at the base of our pumpkin. So this bottom row here is row 1, where we're going to start with 2 beads. Then we're going to increase on each row till we get to the middle here, and then we'll start to decrease working up to the top. So I quite often find it useful to work with another piece of paper or a ruler so that I can just move it as I move from row to row, and I won't lose my place. So if you've taken a screenshot of the pattern and you've then cut it and edited it to cut it to size so that you don't get all the other paraphernalia in your picture, and you've printed it out, have something that you can use just so that you can keep track of where you are. So I'm going to pop that over to this side here, and that's where we're going to start with. And you need to put about 3/4 meter of thread onto your needle, so that's 75 centimeters on your needle. As I said, we're going to start at the bottom with, this is our row 1 with 2 oranges, and we're actually going to start with ladder stitch to get this going. So I'm picking up 2 of my orange size 8 seed beads, and I'm going to move them down to my tail, but I'm going to leave about 10 centimeters so that I can weave that away at the end and I have no chance of all my work unraveling. So I'm going to pass the needle back up through the very first bead that I added. And this will allow these 2 beads to sit side by side as they are in the pattern. But I'm just going to reinforce this so that they do sit side by side and they don't jiggle around by passing back down through the bead on the right. And I want my working thread the opposite end to my tail thread, so I'm holding my tail here. So I'm going to pass back up through the bead on the left. And that is my row 1 complete. So I can move my little slip of paper up to row 2. Now, we all have our own little quirks and ways of beading, and for me, when I'm doing brick stitch, I like to go work from the right hand side to the left hand side, a bit back to front actually. So I'm working right to left, so I'm actually going to flip this over in my hands so that my thread is exiting the bead on the right hand side. And we can see if I move this down, this first to second row is a big increase. The rest of the way up, I'm just increasing by 1 bead on the side. But this first jump from row 1 to row 2, I'm increasing by 2 beads either side. So this second row is going to be a little different to the increases from row 3 onwards. All right, let's just get everything in the camera there. So each time we start a row with brick stitch, we're going to pick up 2 beads, and my second row is all orange, so I'm going to pick up 2 oranges. I'm going to pass my needle under the thread bridge. The thread bridge is the thread that you can see that's linking the first bead to the second bead. So I'm coming from behind under the thread bridge. Pull my beads through. And again, I want them to be sitting side by side, and I'm going to pass back up through the second bead. Now you can see they're not sitting exactly side by side, so just as we reinforced the first 2 in row 1, I can reinforce these 2, and you can see how this second one is sticking out on a diagonal to the row below. But as I mentioned, we're increasing by 2. So before I do too much reinforcing, I'm going to come back down through the second bead because I still need to add an extra one on the end here. So down through the second bead, I'm going to pick up another orange, and I'm going to pass back down through the same bead again. And this one is coming over to the side. And now I can continue going the other way, but you can see how this one is flopping down. Don't worry about that too much. When we come to do row 3, it's going to stay in place. If you are worried, just reinforce it like we did before by going up through the bead and passing back down through the middle bead that sits alongside it. Now I'm coming back this way to the left-hand side, and I'm popping out of that bead that sits in the middle of the 2 beads that form the baseline. So I'm on bead 3 here in my pattern, and I've got to add 2 on this side. So I'm going to do it one at a time. I'm picking up 1. I don't have a thread bridge here. I've come to the end. So when I'm increasing on the left-hand side, I'm going to just pass down through the bead in the row below. And when I do that, you'll see how it's increasing on the left-hand side, forming that diagonal going off to the left. Now I'm going to pass back up through that middle bead. As I said, this first row of increases is a double increase, so it's a bit of a double whammy here. I've still got to add on 1 extra bead on the left-hand side here, so I'm going to pass back down through the bead on the left. I'm going to pick up 1 more of my orange beads, and just as we did on the right-hand side, I'm going to pass back down through that bead on the left. And that one is going to sit to the left there. Let me try and move that tail out of the way. So at the moment, my thread is exiting the base of my second bead on the left-hand side, and I'm just going to pass back up through that bead that's right on the left, the last one I added. So I've got row 1, row 2. I'm ready to start row 3. So if I move my little slip of paper up to row 3, again, I'm going to flip my work round in my fingers because I like to bead from the right to the left when I'm doing my brick stitch. Just every now and then, if you grab your beadwork between your thumb and your forefinger and then really give your thread a tug, it's just going to help pull everything into line and into shape. So the start of row 3, for the start of every row, whether you're increasing or decreasing, you're going to be picking up 2 beads at a time for the first stitch. So my first stitch on row 3 has an orange and a black. So I'm going to pick up an orange and a black, and I'm increasing. So I'm passing the needle under the first thread bridge that I can see. And when I pass my needle back up through the second bead, which in this case is the black bead, you can see that the orange on the second row is sitting slightly to the side of the orange on the orange on the third row is sitting slightly to the side of the orange on the second row. So I'm moving along my pattern now. I've done the orange and black. I've got 2 oranges, then a black and an orange. So now I've got a number of thread bridges there that I can use. So I'm going to be picking up the beads one at a time now. It's just that very first stitch at the start of a row where I pick up 2. So I've picked up 1 orange, and I'm going to pass under the next thread bridge. And again, I'm going to pass my needle back up through the bead I've just added from the bottom to the top. I need another orange. I'm going to come under the next thread bridge. I'm going to pass back up through the bead from the bottom to the top. This is your brick stitch. Done 2 oranges, I've then got a black followed by an orange. So I'm picking up a black. I'm coming under that last thread bridge now. And I'm going to pass up through the black bead. And I've still got an orange to add on this row. So I'm going to pick up 1 orange. I don't have a thread bridge, so I pass directly down through the bead on the row below. I'm going to come up through the bead that sits to the right of it, and I want to be exiting that top row, the 3rd bead from the left, and you'll see why in a moment. So I'm exiting the 3rd bead from the left, 1, 2, 3, and I'm now going to work my way back to this bead on the left hand side so that I can start row 4. But I want to be exiting the top of it, so I'm going to come down through the black bead. Whoops, sorry about that. And I'm going to come up through that orange bead. If I had exited the black bead, I would have come down through the orange bead on the end, and I want to be exiting the top. That's why we come up through the 3rd bead from the left. Right, I'm going to flip my work around again so that I'm working right to left, and let's just sort this out. Row 1, 2, 3, we're on row 4. And it's another increase row, and again you're going to start the row by picking up 2 beads. So it's an orange and a black first, and because I'm increasing, I'm passing under that first thread bridge again. You can always give the beads a helping hand to sit as you want them to sit, and once you pull your threads tight, it does kind of pull them into place. So I'm passing back up through the black bead from the bottom to the top. And now I'm going to go along the rest of the row one by one. So it was orange, black, black. So I've picked up the second black. I'm going underneath the next thread bridge, and I'm passing my needle back up through the bead I've just added from the base to the top. The next one on my pattern is an orange. Under the thread bridge, get the tail out the way, and back up through the bead. Then I've got 2 blacks, so I'm picking up a black under the thread bridge, back up through the bead, another black. There's my last thread bridge. I'm coming under, back up through the bead, and I've got 1 more orange to add on the side, no thread bridge. So I'm just going to show you this again. I'm going to come down through the bead in the row below, and then I'm going to come up through the black bead alongside it, so we're still working in the row below, and then to peek out on the row that we've just completed, I'm coming up through the third bead from the left, and then I can make my way back across to the left so that I am then ready to start my next row. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. I'm about to start row 5. Move my slip of paper up, and you can see I've got 2 more rows of increasing to do. So I'm going to do those exactly the same, and then I'm going to come back to you when we start to decrease. I've just completed my last row of increases. So on my pattern, this is the half I've done, the bottom half with the pumpkin, the carved mouth. So the last row I did was this solid orange row, and you can see how the beads now start to decrease on the side. We're still going to start each row the same way by picking up 2 beads for the first stitch, but we're going to go under a different thread bridge. So on our increases, we passed through under the first thread bridge we saw. So if we look at our first row of decreasing, we've got 2 oranges, and I'm going to pick up 2 oranges to begin with. I'm going to ignore the first thread bridge, and I'm going to come under the second thread bridge. And then it's just the same as what we've been doing all along. You're going to pass up through the second bead that you added in that row. But you can see how this first one wants to sit at an angle, so we need to give it a helping hand to sit flat on the row below. So we're going to just reinforce it by passing down through the bead on the right and back up through the bead on the left. And when you pull your threads through and you give it an extra tug, you can see that those 2 are now sitting on a diagonal, but the diagonal is now going the other way because we're decreasing. The rest of the row is going to just be 1 by 1 as we did before. So my next bead is a black, and I look for the next thread bridge that I pass underneath and pass up through that bead. Then I've got 2 oranges, but remember you're doing them one at a time. So under the thread bridge, back up through the bead, and second orange under the next thread bridge, back up through the bead, and then we have a black under the next thread bridge, back up through the bead, and then we have 2 oranges. So 1 by 1. There's the first one. My tail just got caught in there. And here's the second one. Now there's still a thread bridge there for me to use, so I'm going to use that. The decreases happen very naturally. Decreasing is a lot easier to remember than the increasing. There is my row complete. So you can see I'm decreasing on both the right and the left hand side. So I can move up another one, and again I'm going to start the row by picking up 2 beads, and it's an orange and a black. So an orange and a black. I'm going to just flip this over again so that I'm on the right hand side for starting. I leave the first thread bridge and I come under the second thread bridge. Back up through the second bead, and then I'm just going to give these 2 a helping hand to sit in the right place. So you come back down through the orange and back up through the black. And when you give your beads a tug or your thread a tug, they sit in the right place. And if I continue with my pattern, the next one's a black, and I'm looking for the next thread bridge and then back up through the bead. So I'm going to continue now with my decreases. As you've seen, they happen quite naturally. We have enough thread bridges from the row before to utilize, so it makes the decreasing a lot simpler. A black under the next thread bridge, pass up through the bead, another black under the next thread bridge, pass up through the bead you've just added, and I'm going to finish this row with an orange and I've still got one thread bridge to use there, so I'm passing under the thread bridge and passing back up through that orange, and I have completed my row. And once again I would flip it before I start the next row, picking up 2 beads to begin with, an orange and a black, and I would skip the first thread bridge and come under the second. So I'm going to finish off the top of my pumpkin and come back to you a little later. I've come all the way through my decreases up to the pumpkin stalk now. So I'm up to this row on my pattern where I'm just going to be adding in the green beads. So just like any other row, we're going to pick up 2, the first stitch of the row. We're going to skip the first thread bridge and we're going to come underneath the second thread bridge. Pass back up through the second bead, and just to get them sitting nice and flat, we're going to reinforce them like we do with every time we add 2 beads on the edge of a row. So there are my 2 green, and I've now just got 1, that very top one, to add. So I'm going to pick up 1 and I'm going to come underneath the thread bridge and back up through that top one, so it ends in a nice neat point. And I'm then adding on my shepherd's hook, so I'm just going to pick up the loop of my shepherd's hook and I'm going to pass back down through 2 of the greens, and I'm just going to come back up through this first green on the left, and I'm going to take my thread straight across and down the green bead on the right, all the time ensuring that you pull your thread through tightly so that your thread gets gobbled up between the rows. You don't see the thread sticking out. You now need to end off your thread, so I'm just going to pass down through the beads. You don't want to pass over any beads because you'll have thread showing, and you're just going to create a little maze with your thread. So I've come down through a couple of beads and I'm going to change direction to confuse the thread, and I'm going to come up through a couple of beads, all the time pulling that thread tight so that it disappears in between the rows. I'm changing direction again and I'm coming down and I'm going to come down through another one and one more. I'm coming down through one of the blacks. I always like to end on one of the edge beads because it's a lot easier snipping off your thread and not going through a bead. So I'm going to pass up through one of the beads on the end, and then I can take my thread zapper and get things out the way here. Take my thread zapper and I can just get rid of that thread. The next thing to do is I'm going to thread my needle onto the tail, and I'll show you how to weave. I've got my needle on my tail thread, and just as we wove the thread away at the top, we're going to do exactly the same at the base. So I'm going to pass up through a couple of beads, making sure that I pass through the center of the bead, and I'm going 1 bead at a time so that I don't inadvertently skip across and go through a bead further up. I'm going to come down through a couple and I'm changing direction again. I'm going up and I'm just basically tying the thread up in its own knots. I'm going to come up through another one. My thread is getting really short now. If you confuse it by changing direction, it means that if one lot of thread manages to undo itself, it's not going to know which way to go next to continue unraveling. So there I'm on the end again, and I can bring in my thread zapper and zap off that thread. And my pumpkin is finished. As I said, you might want to try it in 11s. Brick stitch is a wonderful stitch if you are trying to bead
characters, little people or animals or flowers. Because the increase and decrease is fairly simple, you can do all sorts of shapes. So it's a really versatile stitch to know what to do. I hope you've enjoyed our little pumpkin tutorial. I'd love to see them if you make them, so please tag me or pop them on my Facebook page, Jo Barclay Loggie Handmade Jewellery. If you've enjoyed the tutorial, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you would like to see what's coming next, you need to remember to hit that little alarm button, the subscribe button, which doesn't cost a penny, but it just means that the next time I upload a new tutorial, you will be notified that there's something new to see. Any questions, as usual, please pop them down in the comments below and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.